Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for coming out. I'm Dr. Brandy McNeil, Deputy Director of Branch Programs and Services for the New York Public Library. I am thrilled to have you here at our library at Tompkins Square Branch. This is going to be an engaging conversation about parenting and AI. The New York Public Library is dedicated to inspiring lifelong learning, advancing knowledge, and strengthening our communities. We achieve this by providing essential, no-cost resources, programs, and services to everyone, regardless of their background, financial status, or beliefs. In a time of rising misinformation, inequality, and division, the role of public libraries has never been more vital. Our aim is to remove barriers and help you all reimagine your lives, careers, abilities, and place in this world. We do that by solidifying our libraries as engines of economic mobility. This event is our fourth in the 8-part panel series presented in collaboration with Women TechExchange, designed to facilitate community discussions on the diverse impacts of AI. The topic tonight is a direct effort to fulfill our mission. Furthermore, this series marks the launch of our NYPL AI Literacy Initiative. This fall, we will be offering a variety of hands-on practical and educational AI classes that will be available in person and online, as well as asynchronously. While our Q&A segment will officially begin at the end of the panel, you can scan the QR code right there. And as you're watching the panel, go ahead and start inserting your questions so that you don't forget them. If you're not already, you might need to connect to our Wi-Fi. So just want to remind everybody of that. That'll be NYPL. And now I'd like to introduce our moderator, Stephanie LeBlanc Godfrey. Stephanie is the founder of Mother AI, which helps parents leverage AI for their own benefit while amplifying their ability to advocate for their children's voices and future. She holds a bachelor's in electrical engineering from the Stevens Institute of Technology, where she now serves on the board of the School of Engineering, and spent over a decade at Google in senior leadership roles, advancing global inclusion initiatives. Please welcome Stephanie LeBlanc Godfrey.
I'll stand up here for now. Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. Thank you for having me here today. So I'm so excited. I have a company literally called Mother AI, and so I am focused on mothers and parents, whoever has a duty of care for children, so not just moms, and really focused on what it means for AI and families. There's a lot of conversations about what it means in schools and with jobs and with the existential crisis and all of these different topics. And I wanted to create a space of what does it look like to sit at the table with our kids, with our grandparents, with our parents, and really talk about what AI means for us. And so I love that I'll be speaking in conversation with some powerhouses today to really open up the conversation around what the heck is really AI doing to our kids? What does it mean for us as parents? What agency and autonomy do we have as parents as it feels in many instances that AI is happening to us and that we maybe don't feel like we have a say? The short answer is we do. And the folks that I will introduce shortly will be able to talk through that. So first, I want to introduce Christy Crawford. She is the Senior Director for the Computer Science AI Education Team for the New York City Public Schools, which is the largest school system in the country. And before she was shaping this for 1 million plus kids, she spent more than a decade teaching in classrooms in Harlem and the Bronx. So she knows what this looks like from not only the front of the room, but also behind the scenes with teachers. She's also raising 2 boys, one about to start high school and one headed to college in the fall. Christy? Our next speaker is Ron Summers. He has spent more than 20 years getting computing fluency and tech career skills in the hands of kids who'd otherwise be left out. He scaled computer science across all 1,800 New York City public schools, taking access from 5% of students to 91%. He's now the Chief Impact Officer at Mouse and father of two. Ron. And Bo Young Lee is the CEO of AI for All, where she trains the next generation of the people who actually build these systems. And she trains them as a tech ethicist to question the very thing they're building. She was the first chief diversity officer at Uber. She's finishing her master's in AI ethics at Cambridge, and she is the mother of two. Welcome, Bo. All right, so I'm gonna transition to sitting. Yeah. Is everyone? You should have a mic. You got a mic. You got a mic. All right, awesome. So let's. Do you hear me? Okay, great. So let's start off with AI in classrooms. That's a lot of what we're hearing, particularly for New York City. We have a new chancellor. A few months back, they shared the AI guidance. They'll soon be releasing what the AI playbook looks like for New York City. And so we want to get a sense first from you, Ron, as to walk us through what the process looks like when a teacher, a principal says, hey, we want an AI tool in our school to solve X problem or to take advantage of Y opportunity. What does that process look like? And then also, where do parents fit in that chain of acknowledgement and for that piece?
This is a great question because it's about the bread making it to the supermarket, for other terms. So it all starts with software. We're not talking about hardware in this case. So there are lots of companies who build software products that claim or do solve a problem for the school system. That product may be something that a superintendent or a teacher or a principal thinks had value, and they want to bring that into school. Now, it's not so easy as, I want it, now I can use it. It has to go through a process, and that runs through the Division of Instructional and Informational Technology, and they have a process called IRMA. The whole point of that process is to make sure that the software that may be in a school is compliant with all of the privacy demands that the school system has, because we have to protect student data and educator data. It's extremely important. So after that happens, it goes into a library. So it's almost like this library book has been approved. Now this library book sits on the shelf, and now any teacher, superintendent, or principal can access that from the library. Now, if we're talking about decision-making rights, this varies. So a superintendent may say, this is amazing. I want to use it across my region, across my district, and all of my schools, because he or she is trying to meet some learning outcome that gets rolled out, and a little bit of, you need to use it, you have to use it. Principal is doing the same thing, just one level down, but they're thinking about, is this happening in all of my classrooms? Am I going to use it in one specific subject area or one grade, right? But again, they are telling folks to use the tool, and depending on the SOUP's point of view, they may have a directive to just make that happen. And then you have your teacher who may have discovered that tool, is using it in their classroom, or Soren has said, I don't want to use it. But then the flip side is, the teacher could be told that they must use the tool because the superintendent or the principal has says this is important to instructional outcomes. Now, you may have noticed, I have not said the word parents yet. You are not part of the official process when it comes to vetting the technology and it getting rolled out in schools. But that does not mean you are powerless. There are really important questions that you can ask. You can start with, is this software compliant? To just make sure that due diligence has been done. You can ask questions about the actual outcomes. This software is in my child's classroom and they are using it every day. Why are they using it? What is the purpose of this software? What will it do for my child? And if you want to go a bit deeper, you can actually ask the superintendent or the principal for their AI plan. What's the strategy? How are we thinking about AI today versus tomorrow? And how will it continue to be rolled out where my child is getting the skills, literacy and fluency, which we'll talk about later, to actually be able to be okay?
And I think those questions are critically important because often we feel like, all right, well, teacher knows best, school knows best. And I think in the situation with this technology, where so many of us are hearing good, bad, and different things, we need to understand. It's not something we can gloss over in the same ways that we ask questions when the curriculum changes or it's back to school night and we want to understand, what's happening with ELA and math and history and science. Now, the additional topic that we have to have our conversations with our school administrators and our school leaders is, what about AI and what does that look like in the classroom? And so that's in the classroom piece. For me, as I mentioned, I have 3 kids, middle, high school, and elementary age kids. So I'm in all the schools from all the different kind of learning developmental stages. And so as AI has become more prominent, they've come home and talked about, hey, my friends are using AI for homework, or this teacher has banned it from using it, or this other teacher is allowing. So there's a lot of, conversation and confusion. And so I want to pose this question for you, Christy. When we think about AI and children using it for homework and learning, what are some of the considerations that we should think about, especially when we, hear commentary about whether it's helping with critical thinking, is it mental degradation? There's all of these concerns around what it's doing to our kids' brain. What are you seeing from your vantage point?
There are 2 different pieces here. So you have teachers, they are in a program called Exploring Equity in AI in New York City Public Schools. It's about 114 schools. It affects 18,000 kids. But these are kids who are studying critical AI, meaning that they're wondering who makes a certain product, who benefits, who is harmed, why the product was even made in the first place. Is it a capitalistic piece? Is it to help me with my education? So these are kids who are not even sometimes using an AI tool, but they're studying about the tool. So it's just sort of like driver's ed. We used to do driver's ed in high school. You wouldn't just stick a kid in the car. You would, of course, say, let's open up the manual and figure out what's going on with this car. That's exactly what's happening. They're just trying to make sure that children are protected. But then there is the piece about, well, who's using AI for homework? And part of that critical AI piece is kids just saying, is it going to help me to use AI for this assignment, or is it going to hurt me for using AI? It is huge that New York City kids have some sense of discernment, because AI is heavily marketed to everybody in this room, no matter what your age is. So we have kids who are thinking about, is this really going to help me? So I will give you a quick story. I have my child who is going to Howard University this fall, and he thought about, he's going to kill me for the story, thought about using AI for his college essays. We had like 15 different essays. Are you kidding me? He said, okay, Mom. He did the pro and con of each, because you could actually put in all the different schools, Bucknell, Syracuse, this, that, and the other one, and the chatbot he was using would just put in the different locations, the different school buildings, and it would make different essays for him. And he realized, nope, not going to use it. College advisor sees that, I'm done. Not going to use it, because he knows that the accuracy rate of AI isn't always the greatest. But my child had some sense of discernment, and that's what we're looking for from each kid.
And I think that's a really important piece as well. Is really an important piece as well. It's not only about like, all right, use AI for everything. I often talk about there should be no AI without HI, no artificial intelligence without human intention, human innovation, human interaction. And that part is important because although it may feel like the goal is to replace humans, that's not the goal. Or that should not be the goal. For some,
Yeah.
for some. For parents, it is not to replace humans. It is not to replace the thinking that we want our child to do. Yes, we want to utilize tools to give them a leg up, to give them leverage to do well in any aspect of their life, but not to the detriment of what we want them to succeed and how they will succeed and continue to engage. And so, Bo, I want to bring this next question to you.
Sure.
In terms of these tools are not just answering questions. They are quite literally shaping them in ways that we don't even see. So if you think of social media and the algorithm feeds that, you know,
Right.
if you look at one cooking video, then you get an onslaught out of it.
Right.
So tell us what that looks like for AI and how it's shaping our kids.
Sure, absolutely. And so, and I want to just add that as Stephanie mentioned, I have two children. They're both public school kids. I'm a public school kid myself, New York City public school kid. So I have a kid in elementary as well as in high school here in the city. And in order to answer your question, you have to understand, you have to Ron used the metaphor of getting the bread to the grocery store. And I'm gonna tell you about where the wheat came from and where the yeast came from, where the bread and the water were all sourced, right? So to understand AI, and I think for 99% of us, when we say AI, we're thinking of generative AI, large language models, which are like ChatGPT and Claude and Gemini and things like that. There are many other forms of AI, and so you have to think about this. So my metaphor is gonna be a little bit more about generative AI. So think of AI existing in 4 layers. The very base layer is what we call the algorithm. The algorithm are basically the instructions that some programmer somewhere sat to say, prioritize these factors, take into this other factor into consideration, blah, blah, blah. And it's like a big math equation. But essentially it's just a formula like a recipe is, right? So you have that formula. Then you have the data layer. So the data is all of the information that the creator of the algorithm wants this artificial intelligence to know in order to then operate properly. And for the cases of large language models, it's pretty much every single English language book that has ever been written, every single piece of data that has been written. And basically right now, all of these tech companies have run out of data because they've fed everything that's sitting in the University of Michigan library is in those large language models. Everything that sits in the Library of Congress, everything that sits on the 42nd Street, public library, it's all in there, right? But I said English, so remember that a lot of these are not trained on any other language other than English, and so it's ignorant of the world outside of it, even though it pretends to be knowledgeable about the world outside of it, right? So that's the data. They get the data. Who knows if they got it ethically or not? We won't go into questions there. Then they label it saying, this is information about healthcare. This is information about automobiles. They label it, and it's a lot more complex than that, but so that's the data piece. And then there's the third layer, and that's called the neural net, or what some people call the black box of AI. And here's the secret about that neural net. No one really knows how a machine learns. No one knows, we've taught a machine to be able to see a bee, right? Do you know how we taught a machine to see a bee? We fed it a bunch of pictures and said, these are bees. Then we showed it a bunch of other pictures, showed it digitally, a bunch of other pictures and said, pick the bee. And this machine here chose one bee, but then chose 10 cats, right? The second model that we have showed us 2 bees and 7 cats. And then they're like, oh, this 10th model, that one was pretty accurate. Let's take that model, train it some more with human reinforcement training, and then we're like, that's even better. And that's how a computer sees a bee. It's not that it sees the bee, it's just that model, for whatever reason, that neural net that we don't understand or know, is just really good at actually accurately identifying bees. That's how it sees a bee. And then, so that's a third layer. First layer is the algorithm, second layer is the data, third layer is the neural net, and fourth layer is the interface, the thing that we see, that Claude window or that ChatGPT window or that search bar or whatever. It's that layer. And so in order to talk a little bit about how these systems can influence our children, right? I'll talk a little bit about bias, but then I'll also talk a little bit about agency and hyper-nudging. First and foremost, we have to realize that every single large language model that you are using is absolutely 100% biased. The tech industry wants you to believe that all of these are just neutral entities, but they're not neutral entities because one, they're primarily trained in English. Standard American English, to be precise. And so it's whatever has been written in Standard American English, whatever biases exist there, exist within the large language model, right? So that's one thing. And I'll talk explicitly about how that influences our children and impact our children, for example. But then also, the ideologies of the people who create these large language models work their way in through the algorithmic choices that they make. So for example, there's actually a paper out there that shows that each large language model has an ideological bias. So for example, if you're using ChatGPT, that's the most libertarian, politically biased, so you'll get the most libertarian aligned answers from ChatGPT. Claude is a little bit different, Gemini is a little bit different, Grok is really different, Grok is ex Elon Musk's. And you can see that, and DeepSeek, if anyone of you know DeepSeek is a large language model that was created by a Chinese tech company that's been backed by the Chinese Communist Party, the governmental party. So that one obviously has biases, like don't ask it to tell you anything about Taiwan, it won't. I've tried many, many times. So the ideology, so the bias sits there, right? And so you're like, okay, it's biased, but it's also really helpful. But where's the harm in using these with all the bias? And what I'll tell you is that, 60 to 70% of all of New York City's public schools children are Black and Latino? Is that correct? Yeah. Did you know that every single large language model has a bias against anyone who uses non-standard English in their typing? So if you are a user of African American vernacular English, every single large language model has been shown to rate people who speak African American or type in African American vernacular English, rate them as less intelligent, likely coming from a poorer background, likely having less potential. And you won't see this interaction when you're one person. You won't see this bias when you do one person, but when you scale it at the levels that AI operates and computational operation works, the bias comes out. So for example, if we're using AI, let's say a vendor comes to the New York Public Library and going, hey, we have this tool that acts as an educational coach for kids, and you can put it in there because not all kids are going to have access to their own tutors and their own coaches. The first question you have to ask is, well, was that built on a large language model? The second question is, how did you ensure that that large language model does not have a bias against anyone who uses non-standard English, which is probably like at least half, if not the majority of kids in New York City? The answer to that is they simply can't. There's no way you can human reinforce a large language model to not have that covert bias against anyone who uses non-standard English. So that's one way that and then the choices the children get from that interaction influence their behavior unconsciously. They don't know that the system thinks they're less educated because they speak non-standard English, non-standard American English. So they're gonna believe the tool is neutral, and they're like, oh, it told me I should seek this kind of summer school program. And it never knew that actually they could have qualified for a program at Stanford versus CCNY, right?
Yeah, and I love that. So going to what you're actually teaching in the classroom, where you're teaching children to think critically, how do some of the examples that Bo shared show up in the conversations that are happening?
Hopefully this is on. So it is. Everything that Bo discussed is happening, believe it or not, in kindergarten classrooms, in second grade classrooms, in fifth grade classrooms, in eighth grade classrooms, all the way up to 12. That is critical AI. Those lessons about large language models, that's what happens in critical AI classrooms. Those lessons even about something I didn't hear you mention, but the environment. We had kids at the American Museum of Natural History just this weekend with Exploring Equity and AI Fellows, 2 little girls who said, how often do you use AI? How many seconds? Were you trying to make an art, a graphic, like the kind you put on Facebook? So parents got into this huge conversation about how much they love Facebook and how they can make these beautiful graphics. And then Trinity and Sophie said, 36 seconds, right? Do you know you used a whole bottle of water? Trinity and Sophie are in first grade, but they have an amazing teacher who takes the time to say, here's the framework, here are the questions, here's how AI works. Because what happens often in classrooms is we introduce things and then we say, it's objective, it's science, it's math, and we don't talk about how anything is built. So it's incredibly important that New York has digitally informed citizens. And it doesn't happen unless we have every single conversation that Bo just mentioned. We want kids who question.
And being informed at the first grade level all the way up to our level. Because what are most of the narratives that we hear, right, about our jobs, and we've got to reskill and we have to upskill. and less of the conversations about what this actually means, and to question the output that actually comes from all of these things. So there's another sort of big elephant in the room and heavy topic around AI and the impact that it's having not only on us and on our kids, but how many of you post pictures of yourself, your kids, your family on a social media platform? Right? It's so natural. Or we see our friends and family do it and we're liking, oh, so cute, our kids have done this and that. So when we talked in our prep call, Bo shared that she has never, ever signed a release form for camp, for school, for anything that allows her children's image to be posted on a school page, on a team page, and she doesn't do it personally. So tell us,
Yes.
why?
Yes.
And what should we do tonight? What
Yeah.
should we consider doing tonight?
Okay. What everybody should do, short of just taking every single picture of your child that you've ever posted on Instagram or Facebook off, is to ensure that you have protections and that you go through every single one of your friends and kick out anyone that you don't even marginally trust. Like, even if they're a little sketch, like they give you like the ick sometimes, like just kick them out, right? Minimally, that's what you should do. But ideally, you should take down every single picture of your child that's
Why?
online. And the reason is that there's a couple of different reasons. One, if your picture is online, even as a private citizen who only shows their pictures to their family, that data has already been used by that tech company, right? If your kids are on Instagram, Meta has used your kid's picture to train their artificial intelligence. So one, I don't want my children to be data for these big tech companies. Two, if you have even one public picture, assume that that public picture has already been used by somebody who is nefarious to create images of your children that you don't want them to have. So I have this personal agenda. Every single family influencer that I see online who has their images that put their children online, I have a little note in my phone that I've saved. I just copy and paste it. I'm like, I am a tech and AI ethicist. Please take down all images of your children. You are inviting sexual predators to, one, consume your content, but also you are giving those sexual predators content that they can then steal, put into an artificial Gen AI video and image maker, and then convert your child's image into unwanted, non-consensual sexual abuse material. And there was a case in Scotland not too long ago where a school actually posted their girls' soccer team. It was a middle school. The girls' soccer school posted the girls' soccer team image on their page going, yay, our girls won the regional district championship for soccer. Nefarious people online took that image, converted all of those girls' faces into sexual abuse material, then reached out to the school to blackmail them and say, we're gonna publish this sexual abuse material of these children unless you pay us, right? And this is, even though before AI, this is the reason why I never signed these disclosures, because I don't know who is going to access them. And I believe in children's agency. And if my child wants to put their image out all over the place when they're 18, go for it. They're an adult, they can do that. But I'm not taking that agency away from them, and I don't want my child's images to become something. And, I may sound a little bit more, a couple of years ago, I might have sounded a little bit alarmist. I think today I'm not at all alarmist.
And that's because of the consumer tools that allow this type of edits to images to be possible. So not only is it, child sex abuse material, but then it's also bullying within schools. Mm-hmm. So I'm right across the river in New Jersey, and there was a student whose image was used by kids using an app in the App Store that allowed them to use her image in really just disgusting ways. And so a law has been passed in New Jersey that criminalizes that piece. And so that's another aspect where you're like, all right, should we give our children access to social media? Now it's like, wait a minute, if we do, we don't even not only have to worry about the algorithm and the screen time and what that does, but then how they're innocently sharing, hey, I got ice cream today, can then be used against them, not only by a predator, but also by someone in the school, a friend that could be looking to use that as a source of bullying as well.
And the thing to know is that 100% of this non-consensual sexual abuse material is not being created on the major platforms. They're being created using open source, so available on GitHub, open source tools that are very well supported by the community. You just go in there, there's something called Face Swap, there's called all this other stuff. And so even if Anthropic, OpenAI, Google, Meta, Amazon, even if every single one of them put the tightest reins on their system's ability to control this, it won't matter, because you just go on to the algorithm. A lot of these algorithms are just open source. People just train them and then they do it. So unfortunately, there is no way to stop this because it is open source, and therefore we as parents have a responsibility to limit the amount of data that we provide them unknowingly and unwillingly. Yeah.
And as a group, we purposely wanted to bring these heavy topics in because there are not many spaces where this conversation is being had. Right? It's like we said, it's very like, we got to use AI. We don't want our kids to be left behind. So by any means necessary, but to know what these options are or these things that can happen gives us the agency to decide, you know what, I'm actually not going to do this. I'm going to change my behavior. Like the piece around the kids being posted, I love to post a little picture, but now you can't put your head in the sand when you know what's at stake and what's at risk. But at least as an informed person, you're able to decide, yes, I will continue, or no, I won't, or I'll take different steps to do that. And so that's the important piece of sharing this information, not as a scare tactic, but so that you can make the best decision for you, for your family, for your community, for your village. And so in the essence of AI is here and it's not going anywhere, that sort of chant, I want to bring you, Ron, into the conversation around, there's the fact that as adults, this is something that we're kind of learning for the first time. Depending on the age of your kids, they've been swiping and touch screens since before they can read. And then now our even younger kids at 4 or 5 years old are saying, let's just ChatGPT it, just Claude it. And so there's this difference between being digital native, AI native, the difference between literacy and fluency. Can you kind of give us some understanding of what those terms are so that when we hear it, we understand what that means?
So let's start off with this idea of being a native. There are multiple technology revolutions or evolutions that have happened over time. The folks who are alive during that time, growing up, are usually natives. So I'm not young. So I'm like a native of the days when AOL would send you 300 CDs so that you can get online, right? So I'm a native in some ways of the early web. My sons are 19 years old and 6 years old. So I have a 19-year-old who does not have an Instagram account, at least that I know of, for the last 6 years. At least that I know of, because we taught him that he is always training, right? He is data, and that his likeness can be used for anything. And a really quick story is, one time in high school, he got in trouble because kids said he was part of something that happened. And that's because they took an image of him and used it to say Jerome was part of this thing, right? So he is a native, but a little bit before AI. He is a computer science kid. In some ways, Christy and I, because we go back, he grew up with computer science in his life. And he is the biggest skeptic there is of artificial intelligence and using it every single day, because he has the literacy from computer science and computational thinking to understand what's happening in the background. That, as Bo said, there is an algorithm, right? An if-then statement. And he does not want to be part of any of that. So he is actually studying HVAC and stopped majoring in CS because he said, I want to do something where I'm on the other side. Now, my 6-year-old, although he cannot use AI in our house, he is truly a native of the AI era. And in our house, we have Google Home devices, and we give him a little bit of access to that because the idea is that we need to teach him that this system that sounds so human-like and so friendly is actually not his friend. Just 2 days ago, we did our normal AI check because he asked Google about something in Minecraft. And I said, hey, can you trust AI? He said, no. I said, what is AI? He said, it's a computer. It's like, should you give it information? No, I should not. Should you trust the answers? And he stopped for a second, and then he said, no, right? And I said, why? He said, because sometimes it doesn't know what it's talking about, right? So we have that kind of conversation in our house. So although they're both natives digitally, they're natives of different parts of this, and this is where literacy and fluency come in. The literacy is knowing how it works, right? Christy and Bo have already referenced this. Understanding almost like the sauce in the background. The fluency is the use cases, right? It's beyond just using it for basic tasks. It's almost like understanding workflow fluency. When should I use this tool and how, right? How can I use this tool to create? How can I use this tool to build something? And they're just so different. So in schools, literacy and fluency, and even in parenting, I gotta teach them the basics, teach them how it works, but I also have to teach them how they can leverage this tool that has both pros and has cons.
Thank you. And so,
You didn't say when not to, because that's the big thing. When to, but when not to.
And that is where your literacy and fluency comes in, right? And I think that's your intentional literacy and fluency. There's a phrase I always say, exposure to AI is not the same thing as intentional literacy and fluency. So it's very hard to know when not to use it if you haven't had that kind of intentional learning to understand the pros, the cons, in Christy's classes to be able to say, I should be critical of this tool because that's the only way you get there, because you need to actually have some experience using it.
But I will, if I can just cut in and say, that's that critical conversation. That's the conversation you have in your house. That's the conversation you can have with your teacher. Is there a critical AI piece here? Because the no is, where's the cognitive debt? So at least my sons have been able to figure out, this is when it's actually hurting me because I'm not building neurons, because I'm not doing the work. So there was an attempt to, you know what, I could just write this paper with AI. My child has a teacher that he's with right now who will not allow them to use AI in the classroom. They are writing. You only have the writing assignments in the classroom. She doesn't take it home.
That's what my daughter's high school teacher does too.
Right, because she knows that, guess what? These kids will put it through 5 different checkers. But the cognitive debt is figuring out he doesn't build his writing skills. So in fact, he likes to use a term from Ruha Benjamin. It's ancestral intelligence.
Right.
Knowing that writing is a part of his legacy. Writing is a part of our Black legacy. And if he were to allow the machine to constantly write, he loses those skills. So now it's not even about when am I going to use a comma, when am I going to put in a period. Don't do it. There are times when AI works for innovation. If he can put several things together and multiply himself, got it. That's critical play. But is it worth it? Is it worth wasting the water? And if it's going to drain his brain in any way, that's a no when we don't use it.
And I'll give you an example of where I used AI to the benefit of my children. But again, it goes down to the critical, right? So my 15-year-old is taking very advanced math. And there was one point in time in my life when I could do linear algebra. I can't do it anymore. I've gone from my brain. And they come to me with this really complex problem. They're like, I'm struggling to solve this. Can you help me solve this? And I was just looked at it going, no, I can't. And so I said, hey, we have access to this tool. I'm going to walk you through how I would prompt it so that it teaches you the math rather than giving you the answer. And so I put it in, so I wrote the equation down and at that time I was using ChatGPT. I now use Claude more, but it was ChatGPT. I put the equation in and then I said, solve this equation step by step. And I want you to explain every single step as though I was a C- student in math. And so that's exactly what ChatGPT did. It said, for this kind of equation, you want to apply this kind of, methodology to it. Step 1 is this, step 2 is this, step 3 is this. Then you do it in this sequence. It was really good, right? And then I sat there with my then 13-year-old and we sat down and we went through every single step and I said, okay, now, do you understand how it got to that equation, that answer? And it was like, yes. And I'm like, and then I went through their math book to find a similar, like difficult equation. I said, now I want you to solve this on your own using the methods. And they were like, they solved it, right? And I said, this is how you use AI. But I said, I want you to first think through if you can do it yourself. Like my kids, much like Ron, my kids are right in between Ron's kids. I have a 15-year-old and a 9-year-old. And both my kids are AI natives. But what I'm teaching them is not to be AI first. I always tell them to teach them be AI second. And it's literally a rule that we have in our household where it's like, you can ask the AI something, but should you ask the AI something? Can you, through some rigor, because I always tell my children, they're like, this is really hard. I'm like, good. You're bored? Good. I want them to struggle. I want them to get frustrated. I want them to get angry. And then when they get to the point of like giving up, that's when I'm like, and then that's when you ask the AI to help you, right? And I think that's the thing, and I love that about New York City public schools because I'm a parent. They force the children into rigor. And I think that sometimes we ourselves as parents, we don't want to engage in the rigor because it's really, really hard. But that's what we have to teach our children, is that the rigor actually makes them smarter, better, and it'll make them more competitive eventually when down the road when they're in the job market. Like Christy and Ron's kids, because they're older and they're going into college and stuff like that, they're going to be better fundamentally than any one of their contemporaries because they have rigor on top of everything else.
And I actually want to pull out something that you both said, right? In Christy's program, the teachers that are there, we consider them advanced, right? So we used to work together. They have computational fluency, right? When Bo is talking about the work in her children, she is teaching them this computational fluency, this like engineering design process. So in some ways, the unlock, whether it's for your kids or for yourself, is the ability to break down a problem, the ability to understand what you are trying to get to, the end product, and then thinking about the logical set of steps. And it may not be the right steps the first time you write it down, and being able to iterate on those steps to be able to get what you need. That computational thinking, that fluency, allows your child to actually break down problems, to say, because I understand sequences and abstraction, this answer is not right. I'm going to be a little bit more critical of the AI. I'm going to push it a little bit more. And so the unlock, like just because again, we are natives from a CS perspective, we are also computational thinkers. We are always using the engineering design process for everything. And our kids, whether they like it or not, do the same thing naturally.
But can I say that, but just that term, digital native, you're a digital native, you still don't know how to drive it. Right? It's like, yeah, so be careful. So even though they're using it, these conversations that we're having, these should be conversations in social studies class, in ELA class, in science class, in math class. They're just critical thinker classes. Those are the questions that every single kid needs. And we've got a teacher in Staten Island, another teacher, I believe she's in Queens, Stacy and Katrina, who they are pushing a policy in the DOE. They want an AI antecedent. So it's just what you said. They've created worksheets so that if her children are dying, no, Miss Crabb, let's pull this out. No. What questions are you asking yourself before you whip out the machine? And the thing is, this business about being very specific about prompts is, we have kids now who don't know how to ask questions. Sometimes school becomes a place if I sit and I listen, no. We want you to be, right, that human in the lead who is constantly pushing and wondering. That belongs in any class, and it certainly belongs in the machine.
I use AI a lot. I'm finishing up my master's, and I use AI a lot to help me with my research. Like I'll ask it to find various different scholarly papers. But something that I've learned to do is that I'll ask it to like find me like the top rated cited research papers, and it'll give me this list, and then I'll actually ask it, I'm like, how many of these did you make up? And it will tell me which ones it made up. So it knows like, what it's doing. So that's what that that computational literacy actually means, how to ask the question.
And I think your example with the homework really drives home an opportunity point for both parents and kids to sit together and explore AI together. Because for my kids too, we use homework. They don't carry the one anymore when they like add and divide and do all these things. So the language, there's almost a language barrier between the way in which we learned so many concepts and the way in which they're learning now. And so AI can kind of sit in that translation gap, so that when I'm explaining how to divide or add 3-digit numbers, that I'm using the language that they are hearing in the classroom, which then reinforces what they're learning. And so that then becomes a really good cycle of being able to be, one, an active part of your child's learning journey, two, to be able to not get them frustrated. We're like, that's not how I learned it. Like, we can kind of get on the same page and hopefully remove a few less tears in that space. But also we get to pressure test. So similar to you with math, especially once you get to a certain level, it hallucinates some things. And so my kids have now, because we've sat together and done this, they're able to say, well, wait, that actually isn't the right answer. And so it's about building that muscle of like, all right, we can trust AI, but we need to verify. It looks right, but let's confirm. I think that's okay, but like, let's find another source. And in addition to what's the conversations, like if critical AI can be taught in every classroom, great. And there's a space for us to be at home and to share and teach that with them as well.
And the odd thing, the odd thing is, the three of us, actually probably all four of us, we're all probably skeptics, but also we're embedded in the work. We're probably we probably spend more time on AI, reading about AI, using the tools, understanding it, than anyone else, because we are skeptical. Because the opposite of, because being skeptical doesn't mean that you get to put your head in the sand. Being skeptical means that you have to understand something better than the experts have to understand. It's same as thing. Like if you're an environmentalist, right? You know exactly what the fossil fuel chain looks like better than people who work at the oil company, right? Same thing. Weirdly enough, if you're a skeptic, the best thing to do is educate yourself. The best thing to do is actually understand how the tools work. The best thing is to, rather than running away from it, running towards it. But doing so without being without believing everything that you're hearing.
But that was so lovingly said, right? Of running towards it. There's a monster. My child is going to know how to attack that monster.
Oh, yeah.
That's what we do. So just because I'm critical doesn't mean I'm anti.
Right.
But what everybody in this room could do is raise an AI detective. That's it. And my children love, my boys love to get on me. We were on a trip somewhere. We were at a food stand. I'm like, that's the one. And my 14-year-old rolled his eyes and he said, Mom, you're supposed to be an AI expert. That's not, he's like, that's not real. That's not food, Mom. That's AI. Watch the generational divide with your AI native, right? We do this game all the time. Is it AI, Mom, or is it not? 10 out of 10 times, they will beat me and I'm supposed to know. What the native does have is a clear skill in now looking at, that's not real. That was AI generated. But this AI detective piece, they teach me and I teach them at the same time, right? Nobody knows it all. It's okay for the parent to ask questions and to do it together.
Like ask your kid, like if you have like a elementary school kid, right? You're like, ask your kid. I ask my kid all the time, what did you learn about computer science today? Or what did you learn about AI today? And if I disagree with something, I'll tell them, you know what? I don't agree with that. Or I'll go, tell me why your teacher said that about that tool, and we'll have a discussion. And like I remember about a month ago, my little one came to me and said, Mom, do you know that my friends have AI friends? And I'm like, do you know what tool they're using to create AI friends? And they told me some stuff, and I was like, you do realize that that's damaging to, I literally was like, that's damaging to them. And I said, I don't think that the parents are really aware of the tools that their kids have access to. And I said,
these are the types of age-appropriate creative conversations that we have to have with our kids. We can't sugarcoat it. we have to be really upfront because they're around their kids more than us, right? They're in school 8 hours a day. They're part of sports or theater or any of the other things. And so they're picking up on this language a ton. And so we have to be that driving force at home of like, all right, I don't know all the answers, but we're going to talk about it together. We're going to open up our computer, the phone, and we're going to explore together. We're going to check multiple sources so that it shows that, look, mom, dad, parent, grandparent, whoever doesn't have all the answers, but here's how we go about finding them. Ron, I want to come to you around this idea around collective accountability. So we talked about the classroom, we've talked about the schools, we've talked about at home, all these places where kids are being exposed to AI. Tell me about your premise of collective accountability, what that looks like.
This is a really great question. And in some ways, you set me up nicely to read the stats that
You're
I have
so
in
welcome.
my hand. So piggybacking off of what we just said, some of us parents, right, including myself, we assume that our child is a native, they understand how the technology works, right? These stats, I hope, are a little bit jarring because this is real data coming from a national sense, but also a snapshot that mouse.org did here in New York City. So nationally, and this comes from Pew and Rand, 64% of US teens, 13 to 17, use AI chatbots, about 3 in 10 daily. 53% of subject area teachers use AI for school in 2025, and it was double from the year before. And 80% of students say that they have not received any kind of instruction on AI in their classroom. Now, here is what really should blow your mind. And this is based on data coming out of Mouse and the Research Alliance for our New York City Public Schools. When we survey students who began our AI League program this beginning of this school year, 100% of 1,300 students said that they have used an AI tool. 60% of students had never created anything with that AI tool. The only thing they have done is like look up stuff, try to do homework, and so on. And we also created a fluency test, right? This is with NYU. And out of a 100 score, the average score for 1,300 students on their AI knowledge was a 45, right? 85% did not understand what large language models were or how they worked. Only 22% understood what a hallucination is. And only 28% understood an algorithm, right? So going back to your question about the accountability, I think it's really important that we do exactly what everyone here said, right? We must have conversations at home. But I think from an accountability perspective, there's a piece that we need to be accountable for ourselves. As a parent, I am accountable for the conversations that I have at home, the knowledge that I bring into the home, but also the fact that I need to play to set my Black boys up to be economically mobile and to be able to navigate a world that's not waiting for them, right? AI is here, it will be here, and although we are critical of the technology, I am accountable to my boys to prepare them to navigate a world where they need to be fluent and literate and push back in the right moments. As an executive, I am accountable to protect students. So if I can be first on the ground, working with amazing people like you see here, and we can use our knowledge, our educational backgrounds, to be able to set up some of the early systems that can influence the way school districts leverage tools, the way they act, that is an accountability metric for me because I am protecting all of those marginalized students, all those kids who live in rural towns or in the city who have not had access to instruction yet. Their parents haven't had a chance to touch it. The teachers haven't had a chance to touch it. I am accountable to make sure I prepare them and hopefully influence change as best as possible.
And just one thing I'll add, because you said something. I want every single person in this room to realize that if you come from any marginalized background, AI is not built for you. If you're a woman, AI is sexist. If you are Black, AI is racist. Or if you're Latino or any kind of minoritized individual. If you are queer, AI is so anti-queer. AI has such binary views of gender. If you are disabled, AI literally will get us to a place of eugenics against disabled people. If you are low income, it is anti-low income. AI is crazy anti-Semitic. AI is incredibly Islamophobic. anything that is not a heterosexual, non-disabled, non-young people, because it's also super ageist as well. So if you're over the age of 40, I'm sorry, it also thinks you're worthless too. You know, like if you're anything but like a healthy, fit, upper class, white, male, heterosexual, you know, if you unless you're like perfect in the world of AI, not perfect, obviously, it's nothing, but like in the world of AI, if you're this one archetype, it's not built for you, and it's going to give you answers and responses that put you in a diminished spot. Because AI is working at scale, you'll never see it in your own usage. It will never tell you, well, you're a Black woman, so I don't think you should apply for that job. It's never going to tell you that, right? But it may say, this job might be more appropriate for you versus that job. This neighborhood might be, and you don't see it. But when you do it in the millions, that's when you start to see.
And in the last few minutes that we have, what do we do with that knowing? Because I think we're all sitting here like, what do we do knowing that it has all these biases in there? And we've got like 1 minute, so give me like your...
Okay, I would just say, use it sparingly, use it critically, study it more than use it.
It's a really good one.
Yeah.
I would make sure that you are asking yourself the big questions, and as that output is coming up across your screen, question where it came from, how does that system know, ask it where did it get it from, and then of course do your own old school version of checking other sources to make sure it's correct.
It's pushing critical AI. It's having that conversation constantly. But it's really, really about remembering artificial intelligence is a marketing term, right? That this is a machine, and kids who understand have that fluency. They understand large language models. They understand an algorithm. These are kids who are prepared to say Siri is not a person, right? So we have a Dr. Carla who likes to talk about don't say please and thank you to Siri. I remember when my kid was little, my kid would say, Siri, do you have a penis, right? Literally. Right. And this is how then we become older and we say, Siri, can you talk to me about my friend? Can you talk? What? Yeah. Because you thought the machine was a person. Even teachers with our littles are really beginning to talk about this is a machine. Remember the book, Everybody Poops? We have teachers who are talking about Claude doesn't poop, to make it really clear from the beginning. This is a machine. This is a marketing company. Please be very careful. So it's not just what you're saying to your kids, it's what you're not saying, what the teacher may not be saying. We all need a little help in figuring out what are the critical questions to ask.
I love that. And we're about to open up for questions in like 30 seconds, but I just want to close us out with the idea that there was a lot shared here today. I love that there are notes being taken, that it's recorded, because this is something that, you know, a 45-minute conversation will not solve everything. But holy crap, just to have this understanding will change the way that you operate with AI going forward. It changes the way that you talk about it, it humanizes it, and it allows you to be more confident and comfortable with having these really tough conversations. So thank you to our panelists for an amazing conversation. Let's give it up for them. And we'll pass it over back to Dr. Brandy to lead us through questions.
So right now we have 3 questions that have come in already. The first one is, how do you protect your kids' agency in the age of AI when there could be pressure in their school environments or from friends to build their social capital?
I can talk about that. I can kick that off. I mean, the way in which I view AI is the same way in which I view the conversations that I have with my kids about screen time and peer pressure and, you know, dating and like all the things that comes up with the different kind of learning developmental stages that they're in. And so AI then becomes part of that conversation. You can see what your friends are doing outside, but here's what happens in this house, right? And having those conversations, showing them those examples, taking them through it and role modeling, which a lot of us talked about what in ways in which we engage with our children, of role modeling it. And that is the most critical part for in my household, of like, we're exploring this together. We've got questions. No one has the definite answers, but we do have some values that we abide by, and some ways of how our family works together and runs, and the way in which we engage in ourselves outside of the home. And so that type of values first learning and support that we give to our kids applies absolutely to the same ways in which we talk and use AI across the board.
And I think, if I can steal your mic, I think we also talk a lot in my house about legacy. So that if we're talking about social media, you are the only person that defines yourself. And if you are about to put that picture on, now you're allowing somebody else. That somebody else could be your friend, that somebody else could be a marketer, that somebody else could be somebody nefarious. But we regularly check accounts. We Google each other's names to see exactly what pops up. And digital natives are very careful to figure out their image. They've crafted a certain piece. That's important. Having the marketing conversation about, did you define yourself, or are you allowing somebody else to because you've put this picture up?
So I think I started having conversations with my kids really early. And at the age of 11, I sat down with my eldest and I said to them, I know, right now, the most important relationships you have are with your parents, your daddy and I. I said, but you're now at the age psychologically where your friends are actually gonna have more influence on who you become. And I said, I hate to admit that as a mother, but that is actually psychologically true. So I said, choose your friends really wisely, because you're gonna become your friends. And I said, so if one of your friends is really disrespectful and doesn't study, you know what, that's gonna rub off on you. And so it was even before, it was not even about the tools, it was about the people that they surround themselves with, and will they get that pressure from their friends, right? And then around the time that they were 13, I sat down with them and I said, you know that mommy has made a decision that I'm not gonna allow you to have any social media. And I said, I'm not just gonna give you this rule. It kind of goes back to that fluency and that, I said, you and I are gonna sit down with the Meta Civil Rights Assessment report. We sat down, I turned to the pages where they talk about harm to adolescent girls, right? Because my child is femme presenting. And I said, let's go through this together. And she was like, oh. But we went through it together and I pointed it out and I pointed out examples and I pulled in news articles about girls who have become anorexic, the bullying that happens. And I said, this is why mommy doesn't want you to have social media. Now, if you go behind my back, trust me, mommy's technologically fluid enough that I can do reverse. I know reverse image. I know how to do reverse image searches, right? So if you're posting things, I will find it. But I said, but again, you're harming yourself in doing this, and I want you to understand the reasoning behind my decision. And now, as far as I know, like they're the only 15-year-old who doesn't have any social media, and their friends even have said, oh my God, your mother has North Korea level surveillance on your phone. And I go, yep, she does. So it's really about having those conversations and having them critically with your child, and letting, and you, I love what you talk, you pour, like both of you pour like legacy, and you pour into your children everything from your ancestors. And that's what I do with my children, because they are like Korean American and I teach them about the history of Korea. Like we pour into them so much that they become just that they don't have that vulnerability of social pressure, right? So.
Okay, so the next question is, do you find that your kids become overwhelmed or scared when learning about the construction of AI and the data harvesting?
So for my youngest, he is not overwhelmed. He knows nothing else. He's 6 years old. My oldest is not overwhelmed, and maybe this segues from the last question nicely. He understands that everything that he sees online, whether it's on social media, whether it's just his friends, it's possibly not real. It's the presentation of self that we have decided we want the world to see, whether it's a product that a company is selling us, whether it's your friend that wants to show how popular they want to be, it's all not real. And we really talk a lot about showing up in the real world, which I think does not create pressure for him, because we're relating these technical detective skills to showing up in a world where you can actually meet the people, see who they are, and not necessarily get stuck in the cycle of what the algorithm is trying to feed you. There's a great CEO off in Memphis who usually says in his programming that he wants to make sure his kids are not on the menu of the algorithm. And so our conversations are frank enough that this is not a pressure point. He's getting the skills that he needs to be successful, hopefully.
And I promise you're more scared of it than they are.
Okay. And then I have one more question. How are you navigating the need for kids to have discernment with AI in your profession today compared to your experience as a parent?
So I'll talk a little bit about what we do at AI for All. So AI for All works with young people who are enrolled in 2- and 4-year degree programs, so community colleges as well as 4-year degree programs. And we recruit students and we run them through a 20-week program called Ignite, where we actually teach them how to build an artificial intelligence from scratch, meaning we don't teach them about any of the current existing models. We teach them literally how to write an algorithm, how to source data, how to clean data, how to label it, and then we teach them multiple different mechanisms of computer learning, like hierarchy trees, decision-making trees, other not binary forms of training, and then we actually teach them also about deployment. And throughout the course of teaching them, we naturally, instinctively, put in responsible and ethical AI principles throughout. So while we're talking about this, we look at we have them study the environmental implications of this, data centers, social impact, cultural, the issue of hyper nudging, which we barely got into today. And so that they are learning the technology of AI alongside the social. We don't split them apart, right? So they're like, okay, if you put that in your algorithm, what are the implications from a bias perspective? We'll talk about it there. And so I'm having a lot of the same conversations actually with my children. It's just we do it at a much higher level in a much more technical way with the students that we're working with. But a lot of them as well, because they're anywhere between 18 to 25 usually, they are also confronting, because they're a little bit older than Ron's son, they're confronting some of these social issues for the very first time, thinking about it in that context. And actually for them, it's a harder conversation because they've been my children are pretty much immune from the hype of the tech industry because I just keep that away from them, right? But they listen to all those 18 to 25-year-olds are listening to all of that hype, and they don't know who to believe. And we keep telling them don't believe it. So it's actually a much more critical conversation with our students than it is even with my children. My children, for them, because I think we've all raised our kids in the same way. We've been talking about this stuff since they were this high. It's just well, this is normal family dinner conversation, So, yeah.
I think if I can just add that business about it being overwhelming, being outside is overwhelming, period. And I think that it doesn't come, what I've seen with exploring equity in AI fellows, it's a sense of power. What I watched is the students of those fellows explain exactly how the machine works and how they had agency, how they knew how to go through a contract and figure out what was going to happen with their photo, how they knew what questions to ask, how even something as simple as, why is this on my Spotify account? Kids will say, this is trash. Got it. It's the machine that picked it. Am I allowing the machine to define me? So it is overwhelming if you weren't talking about the solutions and what to do, but there are even littles who now know how to ask. And I think that the sense of discernment that my kids have, they only have it because of my job, because of computer science. They certainly understand that this is really about what folks are willing to allow in school. It is good for you to ask your teacher, how are you suggesting that my child approach AI? How should we be approaching AI? I think the children that are in New York City public schools are just the same as my own. I would expect both to ask questions.
And I think you raised a good point where, you know, the four of us are steeped in this eat, sleep, and breathe AI to have that understanding to then lead conversations like this. And one of the main reasons why I created my company, Mother AI, was to reach out to those who are not eat, sleep, and breathing AI and to be able to create a space for like, look, I don't know LLM and and all these things. Help me create a space where I can understand it enough to then lead the conversation with my household. And so I think it's an important space where, yes, you're seeing experts in this space, but there are also many programs and organizations that are creating the space for that education for kids, for teens and young adults, and then also for parents in the face of all of this barrage of media commentary and narratives that we're kind of being hit with, that we are the reinforcements, and lots of others like us who aren't sitting on the stage with us today that are creating the space to push back on all of that and say, like, yeah, they're saying that, like, let's sit down, take a breath, and then really talk about what that means for you, for your kids, for your parents even, and for your community members, and how to manage that.
And then I have maybe one last question. How do you give your children experience building with AI, but choosing a model with data that is not so biased?
None of the right now, none of the publicly available models are not biased. So an interesting thing happened in 2023 when OpenAI launched ChatGPT. Pre that launch, anyone who wanted to build an AI tool, they believed that they had to start from the algorithm, get the data, build it. So actually all the startups pre-OpenAI had their own unique model. And in a way, I love that small world approach. Then ChatGPT came out, then everyone was like, look at this powerful model, and then Claude came out afterward and so forth. Now, anywhere between 60 to 80% of all new AI tools are built on only 6 models. OpenAI, Claude, Gemini somewhat, Meta somewhat, like Llama, that's Meta, Grok a little bit. But what's really actually frightening is that about 40% of all US tech startups are now being built on DeepSeek, which is Chinese owned and operated, which we all freaked out about TikTok. I'm like, y'all should be freaking out about DeepSeek. So unfortunately, there's not a lot of like what they call frontier models. These are all called frontier. There are no frontier models without bias, right? I would actually, if you want to help your student or your child learn, I would actually help, like, there's this movement called small AI where people are actually building AI models on their laptop that does not go out. They don't connect with any of the others. They build it on their model. They train it with a very small amount of data that just is them essentially. I love that movement. And that's a really good way of teaching. That's essentially what we teach our students. We teach them small world AI. Teaching them actually, they're like, are you curious about AI? And let's say they're like 14 years old. That's old enough. You know, they can actually build their own AI on their computer and experiment with it.
I will not touch on what Bo just did because, as Bo said, there is no way you're going to get a model that is not biased. But I will talk about engineering design and computational thinking again, because my sons are raised to be engineers. My 6-year-old, he is an engineer, right? He is doing unplugged and plugged activities. He is breaking things apart and putting them back together. And at Mouse, our AI League program, we're a little bit different because our program runs all year long. It's inside the school day, and it depends on a teacher being trained to deliver an experiential experience. But our students aren't necessarily doing any kind of hardcore AI, but they're learning about computer science, about data science, about engineering design process, and they are building things, and they are breaking things, and they are having arguments with each other, and they are trying to defend their point of view, and they are like, let's build this thing, and another one's saying no, and that process is the same process that exists in my household. Why do you want to do it? Let's build it, even if I know it won't work, right? See what happens. What are we gonna do next? So I almost think the way to prepare your kids for AI and for this question is just, again, teach them how to think like engineers and to think computationally and give them some space to build and break a few things that aren't too expensive.
I think another day-to-day thing that I teach not only my kids, but for parents who are asking the same similar question, like how do I introduce AI to my kids in a way that feels safe? So I have a client whose son is into anime, and so they, using ChatGPT, built like an anime game. And so there's this premise around being, creators instead of just consumers of the technology. And so how do you take what your child is interested in and then use AI to like really boost and ride off of their imagination to bring that to life? My son loves to create videos on Veo in terms of like stories. So he's into football and this and that. Let's bring all your ideas together and kind of see in the ways in which AI can amplify that. And that's online, but then on the offline part, all right, let's figure out the science experiment and then let's go to the store and get the items, or let's search around the house. And so there has to be that balance, and it's so intentional. You don't just wake up and being like, I've got the perfect like way to like pass the day with my kid. You have to have that intentionality of like, we're not just gonna err on like, let's just go online. How do you use online so that you can get offline and kind of actually be in play and touching with things?
I just remembered a project I did with my 6-year-old that was like a perfect introduction to AI. So, she was 6 at the time. She is my 6-year-old loves to write stories, and she's really creative. And she wrote this whole book, children's book about dog dragons. There were like 20 versions of dogs, like German shepherds with like blah blah dragon, and then she comes to me, she goes, I would like you to draw pictures for this book that I wrote, and I am the worst artist in the world. And I said, hey, do you want to sit down with me and we're going to ask AI to create these images, right? And then so she and I sat down, and then we started putting, I was like, okay, let's put in some prompts, right? And so we sat there, put in some prompts, and it came out with something. And then she's like, no, that's not what I was thinking about. And I'm like, can you be more specific then? And so we went in there, we went through lots of iterations. I'm probably sure we used a forest's worth of water doing this. But we created exactly the kind of images that she wanted. But the whole time we did it, I was telling her, okay, this is how this works. This is what's going on here. And I said, for example, this image kind of looks like this book that you're reading. They probably use that book's image to train the data. Like, I was saying things like that with her along the way. And so by the end, she understood that like why these images looked a certain way, why certain prompts. And it was a great exercise. And at the end of the day, she got images for her book, right? We had literally cut out the images, pasted them in a book, and now she has this little book of her dog dragons. It's a great, like, you can introduce, like, I said, like, 14-year-olds can build a small world AI on their laptop. Absolutely, that's a perfect exercise for a 14, 15-year-old. But for a 5-year-old, 6-year-old, that's a great way to start teaching them some of this fluency in a very organic way that's very natural to them.
And even question if it's like, how good is it?
Yeah,
like when he does the
exactly.
football player, is he missing a leg in the second
exactly.
Or does he
iteration
have
of it?
5 eyes, or the eyes the same size? That's what happens.
And so
with-
they become like really attuned to what is
Exactly.
real versus not.
But I would say 2 quick pieces is you can Google something called Teachable Machine. Teachable Machine is a really easy way to start with how do machines learn. It's what teachers are using. Lots of our teachers are using. It's the basis of critical AI. You can do that yourself, but you should also help your teacher. Your teacher, like everybody else in the United States, is trying to figure this out. Your teacher is taxed with a lot of things, 180 days a year, 6 hours a day. What training is the teacher getting? So we're not talking about training from, I hate to call out the industry, right? You wouldn't expect your science teacher to get training from Pfizer. Conflict of interest. Instead, we're saying, what is the school system providing for that teacher to understand an algorithm, a large language model, or anything else themselves? How is the school system helping? Ask them. Don't put it all on the teacher. Ask the superintendent. I'm not interested in my child using 30,000 tools. I want my child to have some sense of discernment.
Amazing. Thank you. Can we get a round of applause for all of our speakers?